Broadcasting from Baltimore, Maryland, this is 5x3 Radio, where strength is for everyone. I'm your host, Emily Sokolinski, owner of 5x3 Training, a strength and conditioning gym in Baltimore, along with my co-host, Rebecca Fishburne, founder of Cornerstone Strength Maryland. Each week, Rebecca and I will discuss the ins and outs of strength training, why there is a no one-size-fits-all approach, and why strength is so important in our daily lives. Thanks for spending some time with us today. Now, on with the show. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to 5x3 Radio. We are here, Rebecca and I, on this gray Tuesday afternoon, right? And I did a really good job last week of not touching the desk with my hands, and I'm going to really try my best to not do it again this week. And the reason that's the case is because
Emily.
I have a goal. I've had a new microphone the past few podcasts, and I love it. But it definitely, because it's on the desk, I tend to want to put my hands near it. So I'm trying to keep them in my lap so that Rebecca doesn't give me that evil eye of,
Well, or last week you solved it by having some kind of camera issue where I couldn't give you.
Right. She couldn't see me. That was kind of strange. That was still a little strange. I like that we can see each other today. So last podcast, we started a series on the big four lifts, again, kind of coming back around to that. And we discussed the squat first, since that's always the first lift that we tend to teach everybody. And we thought today we'd follow up with part 2 on the bench. So last week we talked about helpful cues. So we're going to do the same thing with the bench as we did with the squat. Just give us some helpful cues, like what we like to use with our clients, specific things that we see people doing and doing right or doing wrong that we kind of I tend to use, to help other people with their bench. So would you like to start off, since I started it off last time?
Sure. I don't remember that.
Yes. It's like Diego and I when we pick dinner on Saturday night. I go,
that's your free choice night, isn't it?
That's right. I go, your turn to choose dinner. He goes, you chose last time. I was like, no, I didn't. No, yes. It's time for you to choose. You live in a much
more regimented household than I do.
And it goes back and forth until finally one of us just cracks and we go, fine, let's go to the diner. And we go, okay, that works. So, so let's start off with the bench and just start with setup. So taking you through the setup.
I mean, so even backing up even more than that, like if you're starting with somebody, because I was working with somebody today who has benched really just 2 times. This was her second benching. And she hadn't done it for a couple weeks, has been a little bit inconsistent. And even just getting your directional language in place before someone starts to learn the bench is helpful.
Mm-hmm.
What does it mean to be up the bench or down the bench, or tap a little higher or tap a little lower, right? So people who are brand new don't understand even if you say you need to slide down the bench a little bit, they don't necessarily know that means away from the bar. If I'm spotting and giving them a handoff, that means away from me. Down the bench, away from me. You're going to tap higher, or you're going to move up the bench. That's going to be closer to the rack, closer towards your spotter. So that language and that ability to communicate is helpful to establish with a brand new person even ahead of time, because somebody can be in the middle of a set and you can say tap a little lower. And if it's a brand new person, then all of a sudden they're in the middle of 3 or 4, trying to get out 3 or 4 sentences about how they don't understand what you do. So stop talking. Racket. Now we can talk. So that whole sort of directional thing. And so then when you set up also, and you're setting up with the eyes a little bit, I always say a little south of the bar or a little bit below the bar. So slide down the bench. I don't know. Are we trying to talk about setup or how you?
I think we can start with setup. For most people who are probably listening to this, they're benching, and they probably are familiar with the setup. But as Rebecca was saying, you want your eyes south of the bar, or I say forward of the bar. So when you lie down on the bench, if someone's coaching you. So if I stand over my clients, I don't want to see their eyes. Basically, I want to see the nose, the mouth. If I see too much of their face, they're too far back or too far forward. But you want to set yourself up so that when that bar comes out of the rack, you're not so close to the J cups with the bar.
Yeah.
A lot of times when people are set up too far back, the bar comes out, and even if it comes out over the shoulder joints, if they're too far back, they're still going to keep whacking the J cups. So, if you're a lifter and you haven't done this before, and you're doing this without a coach, you might have to. There might be a little trial and error of where's the right placement for you. Right. I think if you start with the bar back in the J cups and against the J cups, and that's something that, we're going to talk about when we talk about unracking the bar, that gives you a good idea as to where to set up. Some people will start up that way and then roll the bar forward. Then you got to move yourself around the bar again. So I think proper way to start up, if you're much a beginner and or you're having a hard time figuring out where you should set up, make sure that bar is pushed back into the J cups hard, and then you should feel when the bar comes out of the rack that you have enough space between you and the bar and the J cups as you start to lower that bar down. So it can be a little tricky. It just might be a little bit of trial and error to find that sweet spot where you should be.
Yeah.
There should be some room behind you on the bench. I've often put a cone. We have these plastic orange cones, and I put a cone once behind someone's head,
like a little mini traffic cone, like a soccer cone.
Because exactly a soccer cone. Because this is Jay's mom. She kept lying down the bench and she kept pushing herself so far back. I'm like, you need some room. So I would put the cone there. So when she would lie down, she'd go and she'd like feel behind her head for the cone, and then she knew she would be. This is for all the women out there who listen to this. When Jay's mom first started with me, she'd lay down the bench and I would tell her, nope, further, move down the bench, like you were saying, right? Move down the bench. And then she'd move down the bench. I go, more. She laughed. She goes, I feel like I'm at the gynecologist's office. Where she goes, come move a little closer.
Yeah.
Yes.
Gynecologist on the other end. So.
On the other end. I started laughing at that. So every time someone scoots down, I think about that. But yeah, that cone helped her kind of get an idea of where her placement was. And eventually she would start to find that pretty easily. A nice little trick that I teach people to help them find that placement is when they sit on the bench, depending on how tall or short they are, to sit towards the edge of the bench. So I'll teach people to sit as close to the edge as possible, right? Get their legs underneath of them and then lie down. And if they get into just that right placement at the end of the bench, when they lie down, they're smack under the bar where they should be.
Yeah, I feel like
they might have to move a little bit.
Me, Emily, I'm a little shorter.
Well, no. You'd have to move. You'd have to come back a little bit. Like I said, you'd have to, depending on how tall the person is. If the taller you are, the further down the bench you're going to have to sit, right? And then the shorter you are, you might have a little bit more space. But again, it's kind of trial and error. And then once you find that position pretty quickly. It becomes pretty quickly. But in the beginning, there's a lot of you shuffling yourself around, or the coach shuffling you around to help you find that right position. Yeah. So once you get somebody under the bar, what are some good cues for helping them find their grip? Because this is a tricky one too.
Yeah. I mean, I usually just start out generally with measure a thumb distance, right? Like if you extend your thumb out from your fist, measure a thumb distance wider than your overhead press grip if we've already done overhead press. Because that's usually the second lift I'll teach them, just because of the setup. It's easier to just go from squat to press. Or if I haven't done overhead press with them, I'll just sort of say, a thumb distance wider than, the edge of the knurl. And that may or may not be exactly the right place, but it's usually a good place to start. And then you can kind of check, right? And so you're kind of checking for, goalpost arms down at the bottom. You don't want fists closer to the body with elbows sticking out, or you don't want the reverse of that with the elbows really close and the fists really wide. So, once you get them into a position with their hands on the bar in a certain place, and you can sort of do that visual check, where are their wrists in relation to their elbows at the bottom of their bench, then you can kind of adjust. Okay, next time take it a little wider, or take it a little bit narrower, that kind of thing, and fiddle with it from there. But that's usually a pretty good start spot.
Exactly. So I do the same thing. I'll teach them typically the same thing. I teach the press first. So we always say, okay, take your press grip And then I'll do the whole, I put my fingers outside their hands and I say, okay, put your hands outside of my fingers. And I say, that's about where, you're going to be. And then I kind of help them find it on their own with using the thumbs, like spreading the thumbs really wide. And sometimes, they'll have to move their thumbs out a bit because based on their arm length, right? Someone taller with longer arms is going to take a fairly wide grip, but their press grip is fairly narrow. So we might have to play around with that grip on the bench. But yeah, you're looking for that 90-degree angle. Right. And I've been starting to use my my geometry terms with people. You don't want acute or obtuse. You want right. So,
yeah.
I'm bringing all my math, all my geometry into things. But typically, so as Rebecca was saying with the grip, maybe sometimes we have to move the grip, move the hands out or in. Because you don't want to, people tend to want to tuck their elbows, right? They want to do that little, when we say bend the bar, in order to get tight, and we're getting to that, they start to kind of tuck their elbows in like little T-Rex arms. And I'm like, okay, don't do that. You don't want to do that because the minute you tuck your elbows, they're going to flare right out. You want those elbows to just stay right by your side. So, and that's kind of the hard thing to teach people, for people to kind of get, is to keep the elbows where they are and to not do anything weird. Oftentimes I'll see if the hands are too narrow, like if they haven't taken wide enough grip, they'll bring the bar down and they're trying to keep the elbows forward, but the elbows need to be a little further out. So the elbows will kind of move to where the hands should be. And that's an easy way to fix somebody's grip pretty quickly, is just to kind of watch. They're not doing anything different with their elbows. They're not trying to tuck, but the elbows keep popping up. And then you realize, oh, their grip needs to be a little wider. And then once you widen their grip, all of a sudden the elbows are staying right where they are, and there's no extra flaring that shouldn't be there. Yeah. So that's sometimes if you're doing this on your own, check that. If you find your elbows constantly flaring out and you're not physically trying to tuck them in, adjust your grip. You probably need to open your grip a little bit, and that should fix things.
Yeah. And then I guess also as far as grip goes, with people who are kind of new to barbell training, as far as grip goes, the other two things that sometimes will pop up at that point when you're figuring out where to place your hands on the bar is where the bar goes in your hands. And a lot of times people will have it up near the crease of the fingers or whatever. And it's, going to be that same overhead press grip, the compression grip, where it's down, basically whatever that is, your lifeline down near
the low part of the hand,
your palm, near the edge of the ulna. And then the other thing is I've had this a couple times where people they're not actually really gripping the bar. Their thumbs are kind of flapping around, their thumbs are just uselessly there, as opposed to really getting a firm grip on the bar. And I think I like cueing grip the bar hard, because without even talking about it, it corrects the issue of the bent back wrist. So if you make a tight fist with your hand, there's no way your body is going to let your wrist flop backwards. And so that sort of, grip the bar hard is a good way of helping people to, keep the wrist flat or neutral.
Yep. I'd say the same thing. I tell them white knuckles. I said, I want to see white knuckles on the bar, right? I want that grip solid. And we are talking about a full grip, not a suicide grip. I don't, sometimes it'll happen. People will forget to bring that thumb around and, get those fingers, and they end up kind of keeping it resting over the bar. We don't want a suicide grip in benching. We don't want anybody crushing themselves with the bar. And safety talk, I think we need to do the safety talk. Definitely, we can do that at the end of this, because that's a huge part of benching. But yeah, white knuckles. I tell people white knuckles. I had a client once at the old gym. I can remember this because he played golf. He was an older guy. And he played golf, and I'm watching him bench, and he's benching one day, and I can see the hands are kind of barely holding on the bar. I was like, you need to grip that bar. I said, you need to grip that bar hard. He said, well, in golf, we don't grip the club. I said, I understand that. That's golf. This is strength training. So whatever you do there, that's fine. But you need to hold that bar hard. You need to have a really tight grip in here. Oh, I didn't. And people don't think about that because they're so used to if they're holding something, they're holding a club. Yeah. I had to be very gentle. I'm not gripping it because you don't want any too much tension. I said, this is not golf. I don't know if you've noticed, but this is not golf. And it obviously helped his bench immediately when he started thinking about the actual grip. So grip that bar, hold that bar in your hand.
So you got the person, they're on the bench, they've got their hands on the bar, they've got their grip. What's the next thing you're talking about?
I'm talking about shoulders. I'm talking about, pulling those shoulders hard into the bench. And the pinching of someone's fingers between your shoulder blades, right? And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this on the first day. This is something that will come over time, right? Over the next few sessions of their bench. Like with the squat on day one, I want them to know where the bar goes, where the bottom of the squat is when they come up, and how to rack the bar, right? And the same with the bench. I want them to understand where the bar is held in their hand. When the bar comes out of the rack, I want the bar to be out over the shoulder joints. And typically I will bring the bar out with the person on day one, right? We'll unrack the bar together. Yeah. And a lot of that is because I don't know how heavy that bar is going to be in their hands. Right? The 15-pound bar might be really heavy. It might feel really light. And then I can get a sense of how to add the weight to it. But also I want to make sure that they understand where that bar is. When it comes out of the rack, where does it settle? It settles over the shoulder joints. And where are your shoulder joints? Because most people will bring the bar out and it won't. And then it starts to flop around because it's not quite out as far as...
People generally will, on their own, unrack it, not so that it's balanced over the shoulder joint, but like a little further up, like closer to their head.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then if you have the empty bar and you can kind of move it back and forth too low and too high, and allow them to sort of feel the difference and feel where centered over the shoulder joint is.
That's right.
It's in balance. It feels better. That's, and then from that point you get your visual of your spot on the ceiling, as long as you're not working in a place that's got fluorescent lighting on the ceiling, because that's blinding.
It is, and we have that. So people are always like, that light's so bright.
Yeah, so I also work in places with fluorescent ceiling lighting, and in that case, if I'm working with somebody in in a squat rack, as opposed to like you've got the bench setups, right? Somebody who's working in a squat rack can usually line the bar up with something like a crossbar at the top of the squat rack, or the pull up, that sort of thing, where they're not quite staring at the ceiling, at the fluorescent lighting, not getting blinded. Something a little bit off to the side.
Yeah. I was
going to say too, because you had mentioned, with the shoulders and the position of the shoulders. So if you've already worked with somebody and they've done squat and you've introduced the concept of Superman chest, you can kind of just refer to it quickly along those same lines. I think what, hugging the bench or squeezing your shoulders, like pinch, like if somebody pokes you in the back and you squeeze your shoulder blades together to get your back away from the pointy finger in your back. But a lot of times what people end up doing in the process is retracting and elevating. So squeezing together and then lifting their shoulders up into their ears.
Yes.
So, rather than get into retract and depress, all of that, it's like squeeze your shoulder blades together, push them out of your ears, get them out of your ears. Somehow I feel like push away from your ears works better in people's brains than squeeze your shoulder blades down. Like people are so trap focused that if they think about using those muscles to push the shoulder blade away, as opposed to using the muscles that are actually pulling the shoulder blades down, somehow that clicks easier for people.
The bench, I've definitely found over the years of teaching the bench to people, my vocabulary has grown, right? Like different cues, different images. I have a lot of different cues that I use now for benching, and part of that is just obviously, you coach it more and more and more. You see the same things over and over again. And you get better about trying to address things a little faster. So I'm going to go back to when the bar comes out of the rack from the J cups, right? I'll push down on someone's hands, like their arms are locked out. And their arms are straight and they're over the shoulder joints. And if they're on the right place, I can tell them, see, I'm pushing on your arms, your fists, You're holding the bar, and I can't move your arms. Like, they're not bending. If your bar is back here and I push down, the bar is going to collapse right away, right? It's not over the shoulder joint. It's not in that appropriate place where you can stabilize the shoulders. Like, the whole point of that is to keep the shoulders happy, right? We want to keep the shoulders in a good, stable position, and the bar is here. And it kind of weirds people out that it has to come out that far. And like, but do you understand why? I said, this bar is not in a vertical bar path. It's like the one lift where the bar doesn't actually stay in that vertical bar path that we've been talking about with like the squat and the deadlift. And well, the deadlift's not a vertical bar path anyway, but we're not going to get into that.
You're like, that's a multi-page dissertation
that's a multi-page dissertation that my husband wrote. Exactly. So, but the bench is definitely, and the whole point of the bench and the whole point of the arch that we use in the bench and the whole point of trying to squeeze the shoulder blades together is to stabilize the shoulders, keep the shoulders happy so we don't have a lot of shoulder issues, because most shoulder issues do occur in benching because people often don't bench correctly, right? So that's pressing, not so much. Benching, absolutely. So the whole idea of pinching the shoulder blades together, and sometimes I'm sure you have it too. I'll sit the person up, stick my fingers between their shoulder blades, and have them squeeze back. And you're like, a lot of times they'll shrug their shoulders up. Yeah. I'm like, no, pinch. Like, and that idea of squeezing shoulder blades together is very, it's a very unfamiliar movement for many people. So teaching someone how to move better with their back is going to help them obviously with their bench. And then the more they squat and learn the shoulder, that tension's not up in the shoulders but down in the back, in the mid back, it's going to be easier to teach them the bench too. And that was a good cue that someone gave me, that Susie Hartwood Gary, when I was going down to see her in Rockville, a couple of years into me opening the gym, I said, how do I help people, learn how to bench better and keep tight in the bench? She said, you teach them how to squat. And that image really stuck with me. The idea of like the bar on your back and trying to keep that bar tight on the shoulder, on the back, and use the back to support the bar. Well, you take that bar out for your back and I'll put it in front of you for the bench. It's the same position as you're saying, the same Superman chest, right? It doesn't really change.
The interesting thing I always find with people is like, bodies know how to do a certain movement when they're oriented towards gravity one way. You ask them to do the exact same movement, but you orient them differently towards gravity, and they get like super confused, right? So it's like, if they're already understanding how to get the bar on the back, make the Superman chest for squat, right? Somehow being on their back with their arms stretched out is confusing. It's puzzling to the brain. So like the demonstration that you guys always do with the short arm, I think is really helpful, because they're still then in that upright position as if they're squatting, right? So that's the same orientation, that hasn't changed. But instead of arms back as though they're supporting the bar for a squat, you ask them to stick their arms out forward and then squeeze their shoulder blades back and down. And what happens is they see how much shorter their arm gets when they do that. And that's where you get that cue, short arms, right? And so you just have, you've shortened the range of motion, potentially increasing the amount that you're going to be able to lift, but actually more importantly, you're making space in the AC joint for all those tendons to glide through, so you don't lose your shoulder off. That's right. But that being able to find that Superman chest with the arms sticking out in front, and then doing that laying down, somehow that doing that in transitional steps helps people, I think, too.
Absolutely. That takes a lot of, it's some people get that right away, but this is, and this is why everyone should learn not just how to bench press, squat, and deadlift, but they should learn how to row. They should learn how to do a push-up. They should learn how to do a lunge, a split squat, right? We should learn how to use our bodies in other ways, because that pinching, that retracting is what you do when you row. Your back starts the movement, right? You see people rowing with their shoulders up. No one can see this, but Rebecca can see me.
She's via her elbows. I'm struggling my shoulders. Her shoulders are up in her ears.
I have no neck now. So that same feeling. So I do a lot of coaching of pull the bar to you. Yeah. Pull the bar to you as you're lowering the bar for the bench, and push yourself away. So that feeling of pulling and pushing, right? Energy going in two directions. And my favorite chapter, and this is in the blue book, the book that, many of us have. My favorite chapter is in the bench, is the 2 pages of Santa Claus benching. And then the picture of rip with his arms long and then his arms short, showing the retraction, right? I show that to people and it automatically clicks, especially Santa Claus. Santa Claus climbing the chimney and Santa Claus benching, because Santa Claus climbing the chimney has his hands out in front, his feet on the chimney in front of him, and his back. And I say to people, here's Santa Claus. If he loses his hands or his back, what's going to happen? They say he's going to slide down. He's going to fall. I'm like, exactly. So now flip him over and make that chimney the bench, and the bar, right? The bar also the chimney. So now he's sandwiched between the bar and the bench. Same thing. You got to push that bar away. How are you going to do that? You got to push yourself away in the opposite direction. That always clicks with people, right? That feeling of pushing and pulling. So I use that in addition to big chest, in addition to, for the ladies, push your boobs to the bar. Like, bring the bar to you, and now try as you push the bar away to keep staying as close to the bar as possible, which is you pushing as hard as you can to the bench. That's a very hard concept to get, but once it starts to click with people, it makes so much sense, and also the bench starts to feel a lot better, and you feel a lot more control. People feel more control in their shoulders, because that's the whole point, right? You're using your shoulders to control that bar. That back is doing a hell of a lot more work than just the front of you. You know, you're getting a lot of work from the pecs, of course. You're using a lot more muscle mass here, but the back is working so much. So how do you get people to use, to do that? You've just got to kind of reinforce those cues over and over and over again. I'm sure you've done this where you shoved your hands underneath someone's back, right? Push hard into my hands. Harder, harder, harder. And they have to push and push and push. And then they realize how much tension it takes to keep that back tight on the bench. I'm like, yeah, it's uncomfortable, isn't it? Now you know where you need to be, right? Once you're uncomfortable on the bench, you don't want to stay there. Right. Once you're uncomfortable, now you can actually move some weight. And it's really cool to see that when someone that really clicks, all of a sudden that bar is just like, it's just smooth. It's a smooth machine, right? I'm like, you're really not doing much with those elbows. It's that back. That back has to control the movement entirely.
Okay, so you got the person on the bench, positioned in relation to the bar. You got their grip.
Yep.
You discussed their shoulders. You've talked about where the bar is in relation to being in balance over the shoulder joint. Right. What else?
Let's see here. What else? Legs.
Yeah.
Legs. What are your legs doing? Yeah. What are your legs doing down there? They're not just hanging out. In the beginning, I don't really pay attention to too much about the legs. I don't try to overload the person. I want them to put the bar in their hands, bring the bar out, lower the bar. Lower the bar to that point on the chest, right? The hard part, not the soft part of your sternum, right? We didn't talk about that. Where the bar actually sits, where the bar touches.
Where you tap down.
I tell the ladies right below your boobs. Right? And you can feel it. I don't
Emily,
have them touch themselves, like the bony part.
And maybe it's the age of people that you're working with. My people are like, that varies.
That's true. My age too. I was talking to Deb the other day. I said, where? She goes, well, that varies. I'm like, I understand. I understand. But you can definitely feel like the bony part versus where it's soft.
Yeah, because usually the cue is nipple line, right? Right? And then I get that varies. And then I'm like, where you wish they were.
That's right. And it's very easy to find that when the back is really tight, right? It's very easy because the bar will I tell them, it'll follow that, it'll land in the sweet spot. A little trick I tell people to do is, and I tend to do this all the time, is I pull my shirt really tight, right? I make my shirt as tight as possible. And I tell people, I don't want to see any wrinkles in the front of your shirt. All the wrinkles should be in the back, right? Where we can't see them. That means that you're staying tight. And that means you can also then find the sweet spot, right? I should be able to see where that bar touches every single time because your shirt is super, super tight. And I know that means you're really doing a lot of work with the back. And hands down, that that's
interesting because that's basically the opposite of the way the shirt moves in the deadlift. You want to see the wrinkles there, here, no. So, yeah.
Well, I would say you always should see the wrinkles in the back. Mm-hmm. You should always see wrinkles in the back of the shirt, right? You should never see any wrinkles in the front of the shirt, no matter what lift you're doing. Yeah. If the wrinkles are in the front, you are slumped, right? You're forward. You're no longer in the in that position. So that wrinkled shirt should always you should always see the wrinkles definitely in the back. So, but legs. So
Yeah,
where
and
do
so
you put your
you're
feet?
saying you kind of get in with a fuller conversation of leg drive a little
Yeah.
bit further down. Like they're not doing too much when you're first learning.
No,
Yeah, and I
no,
agree with
no.
that. I will kind of talk about it a little bit in terms of bring your feet back towards me,
Sure.
right? Or, not get into it too much. But then it's always like, well, how far back? As far back as you can get them where your heels are still solidly connected to the ground. And depends on the person. They might just bring them back and then not quite think about it. Sometimes you get people who are like, well, how wide or how narrow or whatever. And that just kind of comes down to what's comfortable. And then
Yeah.
later we can kind of get into more of a discussion about which position for your feet is better able to generate force against the floor or that kind of thing.
Yeah. We have so the two benches that we have two benches that have no feet, right? They're like the set benches from Rogue.
Right.
They're great, right? They're wonderful. Then we have all of our utility benches. The nice thing about the utility bench is for a new person, because typically a new person, I'm going to start them on the bench in the rack. I'm going to set it up in the rack. I'll just tell people, put your feet around the legs of the bench. Feel the legs? Yeah, good. Keep them there.
Yeah.
And that just puts them in a nice, basically almost like their squat position, right? The toes are turned out a little bit. I'd say turn your toes out and just pull your legs in so you feel the legs of the bench. And then when we maybe start talking about leg drive, because in the beginning I just want them to have their legs, like you said, just kind of underneath of them. I don't want them hanging out somewhere. I want them, where they can feel the legs at least. When we start getting into leg drive, I might even say to them, push against the legs of the bench. Right? Keep your heels down and push into the bench. That's going to, help create some tension in the legs. That's an easy way to kind of get somebody to start thinking about leg drive. What is leg drive? Seems the hardest thing to teach people. It's a challenge. I'm still working on how do I cue that, well. I think teaching people to not worry about where their butt is on the bench, right? That it should be touching. But it should just be touching, puts a little bit more emphasis on what the legs are doing. Like I'll say, imagine that bench is gone. You've got no bench under your butt. You've got your shoulders on the bench and your feet are on the floor and there's air underneath your butt. How are you going to support yourself? And they kind of think about, oh, okay, yeah, heels down, ground into the floor, shoulders pushing hard into the bench. I'll even demonstrate it by sliding myself underneath the bench the other way, right? Having my legs out in front of me and then nothing underneath of me. I'm like, I should still be able to bench this way, no problem. I don't need my butt. It's just, that's just there to, give everybody a chance to be even when they go to a meet. So the kinetic chain is from the heels to the shoulders, except we're kind of broken because it's, like you said, it's an arc, as opposed to when we're standing on the floor for the press where we have the whole thing is connected. It gets a little broken. So it gets a little harder to engage those legs properly, timing wise too.
Well, and I think, so butt on the bench, whatever, it comes up, you get your red light. But the other thing, just from a coaching perspective, because I've had people where their butt will come pretty far up off the bench when they're benching, which is also problematic, right? Because then they're losing tension on the front side. So they're not effectively transferring force from their feet into their shoulders. And so when I talk about making that arc, I talk about they're pushing into the top third of their shoulder blade. The rest of it is sort of squeezed up off the bench, but keeping tension on the front side. So abs and legs and everything tight. So there shouldn't be movement. And one of the cues that it might have been a barbell medicine cue, but drive across the bench, right? So not necessarily straight down into the bench, because sometimes it causes people to drive their shoulders into the bench and lose tension and the hips come up or the butt comes up. But if you're driving across the bench on sort of an angle, that helps to keep the tension on the front side as well.
I have I'm going to put a link into the podcast of a video from Jen Thompson. So those of you who don't know who Jen Thompson is, she's probably one of the best benchers out there. Female. This is according to Diego. Of course, and Diego we know is all-knowing.
Well, I think that's kind of an indisputable thing, right?
Yeah, if Diego says
Jen Thompson, indisputably.
Yeah. But she's got a pretty goddamn great bench. I mean, she benches 321 at a body weight of 145. I mean, and she's 48 years old. She's incredible. So she does a lot of bench videos, like tutorials, and just a lot of her own training, which is awesome. So she had a great video about leg drive, and I've sent it to a couple of my clients. And she has some nice little arrows that she kind of has incorporated into the video to show how when she thinks about leg drive, what you're doing, why, if your butt's coming off the bench, what's going on with your legs, what's going on with the position, what you're thinking of when you are trying to create tension on the bench. And the arrows drive show it, her hips driving back to the bar, right? So I tell people it's not a bridge up, it's a bridge back. And that takes some time to get, but I think once people kind of feel that difference about up versus back, then they start to play around a little bit more with their position, and it starts to make more sense what leg drive is. They may not have it exactly, but just starting to slow it down, practice with the warm-ups. She suggests doing kind of half reps, just to kind of get that feeling of like hips back, hips back, hips back. It's a nice video. It's a nice video to watch. When I saw that, I started thinking more and more about how to coach that and cue that for.
Well, I mean, I guess
my lifters.
That's where you get the tactile cue of blocking someone's shoulders and telling them, so they're on the bench. They're trying to generate leg drive. Their shoulders are blocked by your hands, and you're asking them to push into your hands as you're sort of holding their shoulders in place on the bench. So that's kind of another way to.
And she suggests that in terms of leg position too. We coach, like, try to get the legs back underneath of you as far as you can, heels on the floor. But she suggests that if you're having a hard time keeping your butt on the bench, you might want to open your legs wider. So for her, she's got a fairly wide stance. That works for her. We play around with that. So I tell people, let's play around with your stance. Let's see if we've opened the legs a little wider. Is that going to help you? Maybe some, like for my taller lifters. My shorter lifters, they're going to probably have their legs closer to them. But it's all variable. It all depends on what works best for them. Like if they can feel their legs better in this position and that seems to be helping their bench move better, well, we're not going to change it. But if we're trying to figure out what could be the issue, like they've got this, but something else is missing, well, let's play around with the legs. Let's just get them into a position where you can feel them. They're not going to start to dance around, and see if that helps keep the butt from kind of flying off the bench, so much. It's tricky. I don't care too much sometimes that it comes off a little bit, especially if they're not going to compete. It's when I can really clearly see air and I can shove a book under there. And then I'm like, okay, we need to stop that, because now it's like someone slowly squatting high over the course of their weights going up. And they're still hitting their weights, but they're starting to get higher and higher and higher.
Well,
we don't want to all of a sudden.
Too is I feel like a lot of times when that starts happening, when the butt starts coming up a lot, it's not only less efficient, like you're not transferring force as efficiently, you're not staying as tight. But I think a lot of times people end up, I don't know, it's like more pressure in their low back as opposed to that. Like their lumbar spine will start complaining more, or
And some of it, as in one of my clients, I realized that the reason her butt was flying off the bench so much and she was trying to bridge up was her shoulders she hadn't have the bar in the right position over her shoulders. The minute we corrected that, the minute we kind of reminded her where the bar should be held, right? I actually took the bar out with the rack with her and put it over her shoulder joint, and she went, oh, that's not where I've been putting the bar. And she had been, but then she started losing it, right? Because sometimes that happens. We start to lose little things. All of a sudden that corrected it immediately. Like that butt was like glued to the bench because she had her shoulders. When you don't have your shoulders, what's going to happen? You're going to find something else to lift, to push from. So because she was trying to get the bar up and her shoulders, the bar wasn't over her shoulder joints, it was behind them. She's trying to get the bar back with her butt. So her butt flies off the bench because she feels the bar moving, not going back. Well, I got to do something so I don't fail this. And we corrected that. We got her to drill that, make sure that the bar is coming out in the same place every time. And it was like a completely different bench from like week to week, like completely different bench. So sometimes it's just really just that. It's not the legs. It's not this or that. It's something else going upstairs. It's almost like the injury thing, right? Your knee's bothering you. Well, what's going on in your ankle, or what's going on in your hip? You didn't hurt your knee. You hurt something else. like I didn't do anything to my knees. Well, what's going on? Oh, maybe the hip. It's the hip that's been bothering me, and that's going to affect that. So with her, it was the shoulders not being in the right position for the bench, which was causing her to use her butt to make that bar go back. So it was interesting to fix that as quickly as we did, because I was like, okay, what the hell's going on with you? Like, you benched just fine last week. But things can get broken. Yeah. We can break our lifts every now and then. So yeah, leg drive is one of those, like, if you can find a good video to help you get that into your head. If you don't have a coach, sometimes often watching a good bencher like Jen Thompson, who can help you get some news. So I'll post that link in the in the notes. Like last week, I posted the video of Toucher squatting. So I'll post that in the links and the link to that video. It's on Instagram. It's very good. It's very good. I like her a lot. We have a poster of her now in our gym. I asked permission.
Oh, that's a new one.
From her, if I could take one of her pictures and create my own banner, because there are no posters or no banners of women training, like, right? So I said, can I take your picture and create a banner? She said, absolutely. Cool. So I did. I sent her a picture of it. And then I actually got a banner of Susie, Gary, deadlifting. So we have her. So we have her up now too. Because I just was like, can't find it. I'm just going to make my own. So it's really nice to see. And it's a really nice picture of her benching, because I don't know if the bar is coming down or going back, but man, that arc, that back, I see a lot of people looking at that poster going, okay.
Yeah, that's what I gotta do.
I gotta make myself look like that. Yeah, it's good. It's good. Anything else about cues on the bench? I mean, I'm sure we've missed a couple before I talk about safety. Anything that we didn't discuss, we didn't go over.
I mean, I guess you talked about how the bar path for bench is not perpendicular to the ground. And that's a thing that sometimes I'll talk about later on, because the cue that I use a lot of times for a person, right? Like, you're talking about rowing the bar down to your chest or resisting the weight of the bar on the way down.
Right.
But the cue I will use a lot of times on the way back, especially if I'm spotting, is to me. Push the bar
back to me, push back to me,
that sort of thing.
Yep.
Because it's not straight up. If you go from the touch point and you go perpendicular up from that, you're going to be further away. If you're not going to be directly over the shoulder joint, you're going to be close to your belly button, which is not ideal. So it's a diagonal. Yeah. It's a slightly diagonal bar path to get back to the start-stop position, so that I end up using that cue, back to me, if I'm spotting someone, which doesn't make sense if they don't know that it's a slightly diagonal. Then they end up overshooting that, and then the bar up over their head instead of
And how you correct that is, so I'll say, back to me, and they'll throw it back. I'm like, no, don't throw it back. Put it back to the starting position. Yeah. So where you started from. Yes, put the brake on. Your brake is your brake is your shoulder, right? Your brake is your back. Like I say, your brake is your knees in the deadlift. Lock the knees. There's your brake. Squeeze the butt. There's your brake. That keeps you from continuing to go backwards. The press, your brake is that shrug up. That keeps the bar from wanting to keep traveling. You're not putting the bar there, you're getting yourself under the bar. And we'll talk about that with the press, but the bench works the same way. Yeah, they'll throw the bar back. I'm like, no, you got to put the brake on. Finish over the shoulder joints again. That's not over the shoulder joint. But the idea, I told them, but you got the right idea. I did say send the bar back to me, so you got the right idea. I use that cue constantly. You hear that all throughout the gym. Back to me. Lots of little cues here and there, and they all come up as a result of seeing more and more people, right, doing the same thing, needing the same cue. Not every cue is going to work for somebody, so you have to have a bunch of different ones that you can kind of pull out. Yeah. Like, okay, that, and the client might even say, yeah, that works for me. Keep saying that. I understand that. You said something like earlier, and that doesn't quite, connect with me, but that connects with me. Before we wrap up the bench, I do want to talk about safety on the bench, and hopefully people who are lifting at home are performing the bench safely. So definitely when we talk about the bench at the gym, and no one's ever benching alone at our gym, but we do go through the safety talk that, having a spotter is, if you can have a spotter who, and teach the spotter correctly how to
spot without stealing your butt.
Spot. Yeah, or standing over you, hovering over you, or having their hands underneath the bar. So teach them correctly how to spot.
No hands in your face, no holding on the bar.
No, they should stay away from you unless you scream. Unless you scream help, I'm dying, then they can take the bar off of you. Spotter arms, make sure your spotter arms are set up correctly, right? Way to test that, bring the bar down, flatten completely out, and make sure the bar lands on the bar, on the spotter arms, and not on you. It shouldn't be teeter-tottering on you. That way you can kind of roll it back towards your head, turn your head, and you can get up safely. Don't clip your weights. Some people like to clip their weights if they have their spotter arms set appropriately because they don't want to hear the plate chatter. Okay, I'm fine with that. Not a big deal. But we don't ever clip our plates at the gym. Because sometimes it's not the spotter arms. Sometimes it's not the fact that the bar, you missed the rep. It's the fact that you can't get the bar back. Something happens. You get the bar stuck under the J-cups. Now what happens? Now you've got the bar up. One bar is in the J-cup. The other one's underneath the J-cup. Well, if you tilt the bars and just start to kind of make a lot of noise, that's fine. At least the plates are off the bar now, and you can put the bar back correctly in the J-cup. That happened to one of my clients. She was benching weight that was like a pause bench weight. It's easy. She missed the J-cup. Bar kind of came down. She quickly dumped the bar. She quickly dumped the plates just because she kind of freaked out a little bit. But the weight was light. The weight wasn't that heavy. She just missed the J-cup. So be careful about that. Don't clip your weights. I'd rather people make noise at the gym than obviously.
And, I guess the other thing too, just to be aware of, if you've never had to dump the plates, is when they dump off the one side, just be ready because it's going to propel you over to the other side.
Exactly.
So you got to have like everything, tight, solid, so that you're ready for that. Pull. Pull in the other direction.
But the worst thing you can do is all of a sudden get stuck on the bar, and the bar has the plates are clipped, and your spotter arms aren't set properly because you don't have spotter arms. Just don't do that. Don't do that. And if you're at a gym and you can't get a spotter, be mindful of the weight. Be mindful of how much weight you're benching that day.
Get a spotter. Because like you say, with the woman with the paused bench, that's happened to me before too, where it's just not with a paused bench, but with like a volume day bench. No worries in my mind whatsoever about the weight on the bar, but I was in a hurry and I wasn't taking as much rest time. And, I was doing that second. I had done a fairly heavy overhead press first. I was already exhausted and just did not expect to be as fatigued as I was by the time I got to the fifth rep. Like sometimes that happens.
Yes, it happens. It happens. And it's better just to be mindful and safe always than, it's just a pause bench. I don't need to worry about setting up my spotter arms today. Set your spotter arms. I set my spotter arms up all the time now. Now, I do it primarily for a tactile cue for me because I'm trying to, keep my left shoulder from, tilting and tapping the spotter arm. So I put the spotter arms up so that I can make sure that I'm staying nice and tight and my left shoulder is in a good position. I'm not lifting heavy enough weight right now to warrant having them to catch the bar. It's more of a reminder for me that I'm losing, one side. But for most people who are benching heavy, it's always a good idea just to, make sure that you're benching safely. Diego always does a safety talk before the bench, at our bench camp. And he always shows the same video of the poor guy who is at home and he's struggling. And Diego says, he doesn't die. It's not a snuff film. His mother comes down and eventually helps him.
Well,
but he's,
but that's the thing,
but he's struggling.
Right? It's like everybody, and this happened in a meeting I was in last night where somebody was like, a deadlift and it hurts my back. And whatever. People always think it's like the deadlift or the squat or whatever, but it's bench that actually kills people.
Absolutely.
11 people per year on average, right? So there's more to the safety talk, right? Because the other thing that you need to tell people is when you're moving the bar over your face and your neck, you should always have your elbows locked out.
Yes, thank you.
And that's the thing that people end up not doing on the rack and the unrack. like they end up, and we talked about this last week, right? With the 0th rep, like how you take the bar out of the rack when you're squatting is important. It makes a difference. The same thing here. So it's like, you're going to have the bar in the J cups. You're going to straighten your elbows. Right. Basically, the bar is just going to kind of slide up the uprights, and then you're going to move it like with straight elbows. You're going to move it over your face and your neck, get it into the position where it's balanced over your shoulder. And you're going to put the bar back into the J cups the exact same way. So when you get to the end of your 5th rep and your brain is starting to freak out, like, I'm so tired. This was so heavy. I just want to put the bar down. You need to settle your brain down and go through those exact same steps of locking your elbows out at the top of that 5th rep, and then with your straight locked elbows, returning the bar back into the J cups.
Yep.
That's the other part of the safety talk.
Yep. I have gotten to a habit of, for some people, telling them, I'm going to give you commands like they do at a meet.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you when to start to bench, and I'm going to tell you when to rack the bar. So that I force them to slow down, because people will they'll bring the bar out of the rack and they'll bring it out with straight arms, but then they'll start to bench right away. There is no settling, right? So I've told people, you're going to bring it out and I'm going to tell you, start. And I'm not going to say start until I actually see the locked arms and the bar where I need it to be. And I'll tell people, rack, when I see the arms locked out and where they need to be, because that's the thing. People, you're right, they want to rush. Well, if I could do it faster, I'll get it done with faster. No, go back to my friend's mantra. Fast is bad, slow is fast, fast is good. Right? Yeah, exactly. And that is something that, every coach should be just kind of emphasizing. Because that's going to teach the person just better technique, better form, better movement pattern, better understanding of why we're doing what we're doing. And it's going to help their shoulders, keep the shoulders in position, keep the shoulders happy, keep the elbows happy. Because if you've got elbows bent, all that pressure in that bar is now being transferred to that elbow and then to that shoulder, and everything's going to start getting pissed off. Like, don't do that. People not using their shoulders on the bench properly tend to have elbow pain, because it starts to the bar is in the hands, and now it's transferred into the elbow, and now the elbow is just stuck there, right? The shoulders aren't really doing anything. Everything's being held in the hand. No, hold it in the shoulders. Let the shoulder take the weight, right? Let the shoulder take the weight. Then the minute someone learns that elbow pain goes away. So, yeah, and emphasizing pushing against the J cups, like you said, emphasize pushing back and up, slide that bar up the J cups. Yeah, so you're not trying to get tight once the bar's out of the rack. That's huge.
Yeah, although that does happen a lot of times where people end up getting their shoulders loose or unglued from the bench when they're unracking it, especially if they're unracking by themselves, like without a
and that's where
a handoff or something. So
exactly.
that's another reason why once you've unracked it and you let the bar settle, you're also just taking that opportunity to make sure that your shoulders haven't gotten unglued in the process of unracking the bar, that everything is still tight.
Right. Exactly. Good. Yeah, well, I think we could probably end there. I think that's a lot of information for people to think about, hopefully make notes on. Maybe it's something that they're having a hard time with right now. Maybe it's the unracking, maybe it's the racking. Maybe it's, I didn't think about that with the legs, in regards to the legs. I didn't think about that in regards to where the bar is going to once it comes off my chest. Hopefully this has helped some of you with your own benching, or if you're thinking about benching, an idea of how to get started and what are some points to think about, some helpful cues. If you've got questions about what we talked about today, please always feel free to send us an email. And you can also message me over Instagram. I actually got a message via Instagram by somebody recently, so we are always connected. Or try to be. Facebook's harder. I don't often get messages via Facebook. I don't check that much. It's kind of an afterthought. But you can always reach me at emily@5by3.com, and of course you can always reach Rebecca at
cornerstonestrengthmaryland@gmail.com.
We will post that video of Jen Thompson benching, the one with the kind of the cues about leg drive, in the notes section of the podcast. And of course, there'll also be a link still for the Charm City Strongwoman contest fundraiser that is coming up on Sunday, June 12th. We've raised close to $2,000 on my page. Now we actually have raised over $11,000 already. So we are only about by $9,000 left to go before the day of the contest, and we always raise a good amount of money that day. So your donation does help. It will make a difference, whether it's $5, $10, $15, $100, doesn't matter. All the proceeds do go to the Almond House and to the Almond Foundation. And we thank you for your donation. And to all those listeners who have actually made a donation already or bought a t-shirt, thank you so much. It's really appreciated. And the link will be in the notes section. Thanks again, as always, for listening to us today, and we'll be back in another couple weeks for our next episode, either on one of the other lists or possibly a podcast from the seminar.
Road trip.
The road trip. Well, actually, fly to Texas and then drive.
Fly to Texas to have a road trip.
Yeah, have a road trip. So we're flying to Dallas and then driving to Wichita Falls for our seminar next weekend, and then.
Oh, that's a little frightening when you say it like that next week.
Rebecca and I will be hopefully doing a podcast. Just, unless it's something fun and light on the way there and back. Maybe not on the way. Well, yeah, maybe on the way back too, because there'll be a lot to talk about on the way back. Anyway, we're looking forward to it. My dad will be at the gym again on Friday, making sure everybody stays in line, so that'll be fun for everybody. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great week, and we'll be back in a couple of weeks for our next edition, whether that's one of the big four or our seminar recap. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great week. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to 5x3 Radio with Emily and Rebecca. If you like our show and want to know more about 5x3 training, please visit us at www.5, that's F-I-V-E, the letter X, the number 3.com. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram. To learn more about Rebecca, please visit her website, cornerstonestrengthmaryland.com. Thanks for listening and have a great week.